Before we get underway in this video to celebrate the milestone you have all helped me in achieving, that being 2,500 subscribers, I would like to give a big thanks to all of you and apologies that this has been quite late in getting out to all of you. I want to give you all a general background of what I will be doing in this video just to give you some clarity. So I will be going through what I deem to be the 5 best and the 5 worst things or moments from the Dead Space franchise. To do this, I will be counting these out in a top 10 fashion, starting at 10 being the worst and with first place being the best, so a ranking system if you will. These things may be within game design, story, mechanics, music, and sound design. Before I drag this on any further, let's go through what my best and worst things are about the Dead Space franchise. Number 10. Dead Space Awakened Cliffhanger. As if changing the direction of the game wasn't bad enough, then bringing us back to a sort of horror style of gameplay and story, but the DLC leaves us on a low note, with Isaac and Carver failing to reach the Earth in time to warn them of the Brethren moons, with the screams of the people on the planet revealing what the two protagonists tried to prevent. Another moon slowly comes from below them and attacks them both physically and mentally, and then the camera cuts to black. The story of Awakened seems to be a bit lackluster for me, as I think we all know what events are hallucinations in Dead Space by now, although one thing I did like was as soon as I enter the Terra Nova, I get an unwelcome feeling, like I'm trespassing on something, like the feeling when I go through Forerunner structures in Halo Combat Evolved. The previous Necromorph presence is absent from this part of the story, and moving further into the claustrophobic corridors, we hear someone making an announcement, only to be dragged away by some mysterious individuals. The not knowing aspect of horror is what truly sells it to the audience, not knowing who these people are, or worse, what they will do to the individual they dragged away is even more chilling than the explanation, as your imagination tends to run away with itself, which is a perfect response for horror games, movies, and books. However, the cliffhanger at the end just ruins this horror aspect, like EA saw that longtime fans weren't enjoying their game, so they engineered this ending, effectively giving us a middle finger to the face. And worse, the ending was entirely predictable. Of course the moons were manipulating the characters in order to buy them some more time. That's what they do, that's what the markers inside them do. Eurogamer gave this DLC a 4 out of 10, but even that was being generous with them, seeming as it's rather just a mixed mashup of past levels with some new areas added into the mix. I think I would rather give this a 2 out of 10 for effort, as we can see that at least the development team at Visual Games were trying to put together a somewhat okay story, but this DLC is just another example of what happens when you leave the wrong person in charge of the company. Number 9. The misdirection of microtransactions. EA at the time of developing Dead Space were looking at mobile games and other titles such as the Call of Duty games as potential gold mines, so EA would take complete control of the new upcoming Dead Space game, completely rewriting the course of development, telling the studio to make it all about action and to tone down the horror aspect but with some dark elements thrown into the mix, to put a system in the game where microtransactions would be necessary. This would lead into the weapon building system being redrafted to allow the use of such transactions within the game. The system would have you collect parts and materials to highlight Isaac's qualifications and skills as an engineer, to show that he is more than just a necromorph slaying machine. However, the previous game's base weapons could dispatch necromorphs with moderate ease, depending on the difficulty you were on. In Dead Space 3, however, the plasma cutter has been downgraded to the point of becoming a laughable choice of weaponry. If that's not bad enough, a quarter through the game, you will get a scavenger bot that will collect some, notice how I say some, resources for you, while you go through the rest of the missions. Optional missions do provide you with a small reward for completing them, but most of the time, it's better not to waste your ammo or resources on them, especially in the pure survival game mode. So, in come the microtransactions. Need a boost of extra resources to get you through the next part of the game? Well, for $5.99 you don't need to search endlessly for them, we'll just hand them straight over to you. Want your scavenger bots to return quicker with the same amount of resources as they previously would? Well, just throw some money our way, and we will make it happen. In my opinion, it just makes the pure survival game mode look like a transaction simulator, except from there is no simulation. In my opinion though, microtransactions should not be in video games unless they are for cosmetic use only. For example, the skins in League of Legends. Microtransactions only highlight one thing: profit, not passion. Number 8. Dead Space Downfall. There isn't much to say on this point other than the reasons I have a general dislike of this film. The writers seem to not possess an ability on how to convey the message that this is an adult film, not a family-orientated anime, other than having at least a couple of lines of swearing in nearly every scene, and the other reason, cutting out characters like Dr. Mercer, the film really could have delved a little bit deeper into the lore of its characters, showing us what the audio logs within the game could not, and would leave us to piece the puzzle together for ourselves. And to be honest, I would have loved to see a scene with Dr. Mercer experimenting on necromorphs and creating the Hunter, but sadly, it was not meant to be. At least we didn't get any hentai. At least, not till Aftermath. Yeah, let's move on, shall we? Number 7. Hallucinations. Now, I don't mind hallucinations, just as long as they don't come with an Iron Brew filter. I like the ones in Dead Space because it didn't come with that filter, and we couldn't tell if it was an hallucination or the real deal, giving the writing team more power to hint and poke at the player's intelligence and to really mess with their heads. They would begin using this filter in some areas of Dead Space 2, but rarely happens. However, in Dead Space 3, this happens in nearly every hallucination, which is borderline overkill. Number 6. Why didn't Isaac watch Nicoles' video to the end? This is probably the biggest plot hole of the series, but if Isaac had watched Nicoles' death video all the way to the bitter end, then he would never have gone to Aegis 7. The colony would have still been infested, everything that would have transpired in the game would never have happened, and at the end of the game, he is generally shocked that she is dead, like he is thinking, "Oh my god, I could have just watched the ending and saved myself from this horrific and traumatic experience. Holy crap, I'm such a moron." That is just generally mind-blowing to me how this even made it into the game's final production. Number 5. Isaac's muted persona. With Isaac being a mute character within Dead Space, it allows for his animations of his body language to speak for him. Even though that this would not be a regular occurrence throughout the game, it does allow the player to hear the sound design easier, which builds atmosphere and environmental storytelling. The game would rely on environmental storytelling aspects along with the exploration storytelling, such as with the use of text, audio and video logs found throughout the ship and the planet. The environmental aspect would be from seeing blood and cryptic messages on the walls, along with the bodies being either laid out in groups or on their own, allowing the environment to give us an idea into what had transpired in these events, and that it could happen again at any moment. There is another advantage to having a mute protagonist as the playable character, which is that the player themselves can immerse themselves easier into that role, and imagine themselves to be, in this case, within Isaac's boots. Number 4. Isaac's character development. In many games, the studios just play it safe with some characters, not risking the popularity of such a character within the world that they are trying to build, fearing the backlash of their fans. However, Isaac was an exception to this, as Visual wanted to flesh out the character more and wanted him to take charge of the events of another necromorph outbreak, and that would be pretty hard to portray in a character that never speaks. It works for certain characters in other games, but it is still hard to do so nonetheless. With Isaac having the ability to speak and portray his personality, it gives him a lot more depth within the world. We can see Isaac has a somewhat comical side to him, allowing him to crack a certain joke, this being a rare occasion, like for instance Dana informs them on how to stop the necromorphs, with him replying, "I know, I've had a lot of practice." We can see him act somewhat as a sociopath, unable to connect with certain characters and individuals within Dead Space 2. This is evident to his growing dementia, the stolen years of his life, and the experiences he has had in the past few years. With the ability to speak, Isaac can speak on things and missions, given his own feedback in Dead Space. They did have him state these thoughts on objectives, but only within his journal in Dead Space 1. In Dead Space 2, he could speak freely and openly to others. I feel that this change is acceptable and healthy to the course of the progression of the character, seeming as Dead Space 2 is a different game compared to the first installment, as Dead Space was intended to be a survival horror game, with Dead Space 2 being intended to be a survival action game. Number 3. The sound and music of Dead Space. The years to come after the release of Dead Space, the studio would be commended for the use of sound and music within the game, allowing for the game to be awarded over the next 2 years, with some still holding it as a classic horror masterpiece and a masterclass within sound design. The sound design itself is amazing. While walking through the hallways and corridors of the Ishimura, you can hear scratching within the vents, the walls, and sometimes the floor, putting the players on edge, as we all know where the necromorphs spawn in from. While nothing is happening or after a fight, you will hear Isaac breathe through his helmet and his heartbeat as if his heart were exposed, giving the player an insight into the stress that is plaguing Isaac both physically and mentally. In the distance you could hear a roar of a necromorph, or a pipe falling over, or a survivor in their last moments. You hear it, but you can't quite locate where it came from, once again building atmosphere and depth to the game. The most impressive feat being that the faster Isaac moves, the more intense the music becomes. This is also evident in the menu for scrolling speed. If Isaac walks, the music will be at times ambient. If he should run, the music will get louder and more intense. I personally love this system for music, like how Halo uses music in an adaptive way to portray the mood of a situation, turning from rock, metal to chilled out vibe music in the same mission as to not bore the player. Dead Space uses this in a similar way, using adaptive music not for the mood of a situation, but to portray the movements of the character or the stress within the character. Even more impressive, in vacuums or in space, the sound dulls down, giving you a underwater sort of sound design. As the old saying goes, no one can hear you scream in space, but there are things you can hear. For instance, if Isaac should run low on oxygen, you will be able to hear his haggard breaths until you visit a refill station or replenish with an air can, adding more stress to the situation. I feel as if the sound and music design gives the game a more real feeling, like I could picture myself within that world. The music installs a sense of safety at certain areas, along with dread, sadness, decay, horror, and panic within the soundtrack. While making this video, I listened to 2 tracks, one being called Welcome to the USG Ishimura, and another called Nicoles Farewell. These 2 pieces represent the decay as if the soundtrack itself is dying. Here, take a listen. Number 2. The unique HUD mechanics. Within development, the team wanted to give the HUD a unique feeling. They didn't want their game to be identical to others with this system, so they created what I call the Immersive HUD system, putting the major information on the back of Isaac, such things as the health of the player, the state of the stasis, and the remaining oxygen Isaac still has within a vacuum, with a menu that would pop up as an inventory, a map, and a journal all in one that would not pause the game. So while cycling through these menus, the game's events would be still happening in the background, making players feel even more immersed within the Ishimura. As if I look at my phone or my watch, the world around me doesn't just pause, which makes Dead Space's design feel so much more real than other games from around that time. Number 1. cut off their limbs. Finally, we have gotten to my favourite part of Dead Space, and that is the unique combat system called the dismemberment system. Sure, you could waste ammo shooting at them endlessly, or just simply slice off a few of their limbs to immobilize them, which I think would catch a lot of players off guard, as many would instinctively go for the head, which will cause necromorphs to continue their pace towards you. With slashes, they will attack very much like a Dalek when you take out his eye stalk, attacking literally anything in the vicinity. However, this goes both ways, as the game's combat seems to revolve around how you dispatch necromorphs, as they will rip you to shreds just like how you will do to them, but in an even more brutal fashion, which will eventually give you some very glorious and gory sights. So these were and are my top 10 picks for the 5 worst and the 5 best aspects of Dead Space. Once again, these were all my opinions, but what do you think? Let me know your ranking and 10 picks in the comments below, and I'll be sure to check them out when I get a chance. It's strange, I hear this from every other creator, but this is certainly true, that I never expected my channel to be taken off how it has been in the last couple of weeks. But here we are. I can only really say that having all of you within the British Alliance really makes me excited to present content to all of you, as the interaction is the thing that keeps me going on this channel, and it makes me feel even more positive and warms my outlook on the future of this channel. I will now figuratively raise a glass to all of you, as I could not have done this without you. I could not have accomplished this alone, and I hope to see all of you once again on the front lines. And to all of you that have yet to join the Alliance, come on down, plenty of room for everyone, and who knows, you might make a few friends along the way. Subscribe to join the British Alliance today, and ring the bell for the future updates about future content and posts. Also make sure to check out the description for my social media, and lastly to all of you, have a great one.